Today's session is continuing on from last session where we looked at how we set up Flash for different aesthetics that we wanted to take. And I identified that there is no one solution. Just like if you want to cook a meal, there is no one recipe, and each recipe needs different ingredients. And the way that we usually work that out is if we're eating something somewhere, we interrogate the food that we're eating and work out what they did. And that's exactly what you do with a photograph. If you've got a particular aesthetic that you would like, you find an example photograph and you interrogate it to find out what its ingredients are. And I thought, I know a lot of you are sort of hesitant about trying out your Flash and what can you do. And I thought taking a passport photo is something that we all need to do on a regular 10-year basis. And it may be something that you can use to practice, and you can use yourself, or you can use a partner or your children or grandchildren or whoever it is to practice using your Flash by taking a passport photo. So what I did was got onto the passport requirements, just Googled it, and they give you very specific requirements for what the photo needs to look like. And so what we're going to do today is interrogate an example photograph so that you can see the steps that you need to take. And the steps are fairly similar for any photograph, but the answers we come back with when we interrogate a photo will be different lighting situations for different types of photographs. And in this case, we need to interrogate the image and also look at the Passport Office requirements. And so this is what they give you as an example photograph. And by looking at this example photograph, we need to sort of realise the first thing we need to do is when we're choosing the lens we're going to use, we need to make sure it is one that doesn't distort, because facial recognition requires you to take a photo that is in the exact same proportions as your face. So we'll have a look at what sort of lens we need to do that. The requirements that the Passport Office gives us is that the background needs to be a plain white to neutral grey background. So that indicates to us we need to find a plain background for us to use. The subject, just for a photographic perspective, needs to be separated from the background, and so you need to find a light coloured white, pale cream wall, pale grey, that you can stand your subject off the wall, because one, we don't want the wall in focus, and two, we don't want the light that we shine on the subject to be creating a shadow on the wall. The Passport Office has quite strict requirements in terms of the subject not having any hats or glasses on, and also ask that they're not smiling, that they have a fairly neutral expression and no teeth showing. And when we interrogate this photo, we can see that the lighting is what we call flat lighting. It's not creating any shadows. Usually when we're trying to get nice portrait photographs, we don't use this flat front-on lighting because we usually want the face contoured with slight shadows, so that way it makes our image look a lot more 3D. Whereas the passport photo is all about facial recognition and not having dark shadows. So you don't want panda eyes, you don't want one side of the face lit and the other side in shadow and things like that. You want to have it as flat lighting as possible. So that, by interrogating the image, we can see that, and by looking at the passport requirements. So what do we have to do to create this particular aesthetic? Well, somewhere in your house you need to find a plain white wall, and it doesn't need to be very big because it only needs to be as big as what the face is. And with today's decoration, we've usually got a pale cream or a pale, very white or pale grey wall that we can use. What the challenge is to be able to have your subject enough off the background so that we don't cast a shadow, and also that we can use a depth of field that actually blurs that background. So ideally 1 to 2 metres off the wall, and maybe you can find a hallway or a large lounge room or something that you can just get them off the wall. As I said, we're really only isolating their face, so we just need that. It's a fairly reasonably small area that we need to be able to have a background. You also need to have enough room for the photographer to get a camera in front of this person and be about 1 to 2 metres away. So we just need to have a distance, probably about 3 to 4 metres or 3 metres. We want the background to be as light as possible, and that may mean, which is quite in comparison to last week. Remember when we were looking at the example photograph where we had the girl holding the baby? We decided for that aesthetic we wanted the background as dark as possible, and we shut all the blinds and we tried to make the background as dark as possible. In this case, we're trying to make it as light as possible. Now, I've got here that you need to hopefully have all the windows lit, but we've got to make sure that we can balance the lighting, because we want to make sure that the face is lit entirely by the flash, and that we don't have it lit by one side from a window, because we need this reasonably flat lighting. So have the background lit by having all your curtains open. If it still can't get it light enough, then you may get an LED light and shine it at the wall. But when you shine it at the wall, just make sure that you shine it at an angle so that the reflected light doesn't bounce straight back into your camera. So you don't want to be shining it at the wall, you want to be reflecting it so that the reflected light, although the wall here ends up being light, the reflection of the light waves is at an angle so it doesn't go straight back in the camera. Ideally, for my example, I actually lit the wall at an angle with a flash. But if you've just got an LED light, LED is fairly close to the same colour temperature as your flash, so you can use an LED light. So the next choice is we have to work out what lens to use. And when we've talked about different lenses, we spoke about the fact that a long lens will give you a fairly 2D look to the face, which is what the example from the Passport Office has, and it also doesn't distort the face. As soon as we use a wide-angle lens and we stand up close to somebody, we get facial distortion, and you'll often see that with people's noses being too big for their face, because someone stood it right up close to them and used a wide-angle lens, and it's distorted their face completely. Now, a passport photo is all about facial recognition software being able to look at your face when you pass through immigration and compare it with what the passport photo looks like. So it's really important we don't get distortion. So I recommend you use a lens length anywhere between 85 and 120 millimetres, and that will avoid you getting distortion. You also need to use an aperture choice that allows you to get full focus through the face from the nose to the ears. The ears don't actually have to be in the photo, but you need to make sure that your depth of field is probably around about 2 inches. And by using that long lens and only being 1 to 2 metres away, you'll find that a 5.6 or 6.3 will be adequate. The shutter speed that you'll need needs to be sort of around the inverse of that lens length, which is about 100th of a second, to avoid camera shake and movement in the subject. Now, hopefully the lighting for this subject will come completely from the flash, and that won't be such an issue. but you'll need, I would recommend that you go to about that. And an ISO of about 100 gives you the best quality photo that you can have, but you may need to adjust the exposures by using the ISO to get that background to be a white or neutral grey. So you need to check your histogram to make sure that the histogram is right up the end there when you shoot the background. So take a test shot of your background and make sure that the histogram of that background is right up at the white end. It can be sort of neutral grey sits around here through to white. And take a test shot, and then you can decide how you, whether you need to put an LED light on that. You need to work out where to actually place the flash, because the flash is going to be lighting the subject in the photo. And last time I explained to you the best way to work out where the flash was located for a portrait is to have a look at the eyeballs and have a look at what we call these spectral highlights, these bright spots in your eyeballs. And any portrait photo that we take should always have a spectral highlight in the eyes, because if there's no highlight in the eyes, it makes the person look like they're dead. Because, and that goes with animals and birds and everything, that when a living being dies, their eyes are no longer shiny and they no longer reflect light. So intuitively, we only connect with an image of a person or an animal when they've got a spectral highlight in their eye. So it's always really important in photographs to have one. But if you're trying to work out where did the light come from, have a look in their eyeball, and that tells you exactly, with respect to their face, where the light came from. And in this case, it's saying it's come from straight in front and slightly elevated. So that now shows you where to place the flash. We also need to work out how close to place the flash, because when we discussed light last week, I said to you that the further away the light is, the smaller that light source becomes, and the sharper the shadows, and also it depends on the fall off of the light as well. So that if a light source is really close up to somebody, then the shadows, the light falls away very quickly. And you can see this by shining a torch on a wall, that if you get up really close, you've only got the light for a very small area and the light falls off very quickly. As you pull that torch away from the wall, you can see you get more even lighting. And in this case, in the example, we've got fairly even lighting across a face. So it means the light is falling away fairly slowly, which means that the light source, the flash, is 1 to 2 meters away. But we put it, say, 2 meters away, and then we test it. I ended up with the light source being about 2 meters away to get even lighting across the face. So that's compared to the example setup 1, which we looked at last week, where we had the light falling away very quickly. So it actually went into shadow across the face quite quickly. In this case, we've got it fairly evenly lit across it. So again, with the light source, we need to work out if we have got it 2 meters away, we want the edges of the shadows to be quite soft, and in this case they are, and that requires us to have a modifier on our flash, some sort of softbox, because if we use just a flash without a softbox on it, it ends up being a very small light source. And small light sources, the sun is small compared to where it lands, it'll produce very sharp shadows. And we haven't got sharp shadows here, we've got soft shadows. And soft shadows indicate that we need a softbox on the flash. And we can either choose, if we're going to use it on camera, a small softbox like what you have up there, or if we're going to use it, the flash off camera, we can have a larger softbox. It's not really appropriate in this instance to bounce it off the ceiling because we won't be able to get the light coming straight on. We've interrogated the image to find that we need the light straight in front, so we can't bounce it off the ceiling because it'll come from all directions. So if you have on-camera flash, then pop it on your camera, put the softbox on it, turn the mode of the flash to manual, and when you set it to manual, you have a range of 0 to 1 that you can set its power. I always start at half power and do a test shot. And that then enables me to know, do I go up or do I go down? And then I go up and down with the power to get the right exposure that I need. So if it's slightly underexposed on the face, I put it up perhaps one, from a half to perhaps 5/8 or 3/4. And that enables me to just increase it slightly, do another test shot. And you just adjust the power that way. Aim the flash at the subject and do a test shot and increase or decrease the power. If you've got off-camera flash, you do exactly the same thing, but you'll need to have a transmitter on your camera or a trigger to trigger this off-camera flash. In this case, you can see in this softbox on the light stand, the flash is actually going through that. In this case, you can see the flash is going through the softbox. But if it's off the camera, you need some form of transmitter on your camera or a trigger on your camera to do that. Again, you start at half power and increase or decrease accordingly. So this was the setup. I actually had my husband hold the camera and do the shoot after I set it up. I used a large softbox. He was about 2 meters away from me, and he was shooting. The light is straight onto me as the subject, and he was shooting straight onto me. Now, when I was setting this up, I use a hairdresser's dummy to see if I've got the lighting correct. So all I needed to do was ask him to come in and hang on to the camera and press the button. Now, these hairdressers' dummies are the hairdressers' mannequins that they use to practice hair cutting. Once they've practiced, they discard them. And they're very, if you go along to a Camberwell market or a second-hand shop or an op shop or whatever, you can often buy them for $5. I've probably got half a dozen of them, because if I'm doing a group shoot, I will set them up and make sure prior to the people turning up that I've got the lighting set up correctly for the whole group, that they're all lit as I would like them to be lit. And this avoids you mucking people around. If I've got to do a shoot in a couple of weeks, a family photo of half a dozen people, I don't want to be mucking around with the lighting while I've got those people in front of me. They start off looking really enthusiastic, but after you've mucked them around for 10 minutes, you end up with some very bored group shots of people just, oh my God, is she going to get, stop mucking around with the lights and get on with this? So by having hairdresser mannequins, I can just set them up on poles and position them and make sure my lighting is correct. So if you see one of these mannequins in an op shop or Camberwell market, just grab one, and I find them invaluable. For the on-camera shot, we just put the flash directly on the camera and put a softbox on it and stood the same distance away, did some test shots. So these are the difference between these two shots. The off-camera flash, for this one, I actually had another flash lighting the wall in the background. And what that avoided was this shadow. Because remember, even though I was about probably 4 to 5 feet off the wall, the flash, because it's coming straight on, still created a shadow on the wall. Whereas by lighting the wall and using that reflected light, I had a flash coming from this angle, so it sort of hit the wall, but most of the light reflected in the other direction. If I'd had another flash aimed straight at the wall, it would have come back straight down the lens of the camera and I would have got lens flare. It would have been an awful look. So because I wanted the wall to be lit evenly and not have a shadow, I actually lit the wall as well, but you can do that just with an LED light. You can see here for the passport photo, this is perfectly adequate to having an on-camera flash because it gives that really flat lighting. But from a portrait perspective, if you're doing a portrait, you can see how off-camera flash gives you a lot more interesting lighting in the face. It actually makes the face look a lot more 3D and a lot less like deer in headlights. This looks a bit like a deer in headlights sort of shot. Fine for your passport photo, but then, you know, as someone said, you never want a good-looking passport photo because whenever you get off a plane and they're needing to check you against it, you don't want you looking glamorous in the passport photo because you're never going to look like that when you get off a plane. So either way, you can test your flash using off-camera flash or on-camera flash. You can do both if you've got the opportunity to do both. And so that then allows you to put them in a editing software and size them correctly and put them on a sheet and print them as the sheet so you've got spares. So thank you. I hope you find that a practical use to use your flash. I really recommend. You often need a photo of yourself so that you can put it in for a visa, or people say, can we have a photo of you? And this then gives you an example of how you can create that photograph.